Very good afternoon. Now, we are going to take up another topic, that is the role of culture in performance management system, and here we will try to link that how culture can be linked to performance management system. Now, if you look at the role of culture, it is very important, because if you have a good culture, strong culture in an organization that supports performance, or you can say facilitates performance, effective performance management, but if the culture is weak, then it does not support. So, what we are going to discuss in this lecture is that how we are going to associate culture with performance management. Now, let me give you a little bit idea or a brief description of what culture is. Now, when we are going to define culture in organizational context, basically it means the norms and values of the organization. Okay. Now, if people are going to adhere to these norms and values of the organization, then it is good, and if they do not adhere to the values and norms of the organization, then you will not be having a good culture. Okay. And this culture in the organization is propagated by the top management and the leadership. So, they decide what kind of culture is needed to facilitate effective performance. Now, when we are trying to see that how culture is related with performance management, we need to look at what is the role of the culture in the performance management system. And as I told you that culture reflects the values and identity of the organization. Okay. You remember sometimes people say no, the culture of this organization is very good. What does it mean? It means that they are talking about the values, the norms which represent the culture of the organization, and whether people follow those values or norms or not, right. Now, if you look at companies, you will find that either they are going to have a very strong culture or a very weak culture. So, if you look at the strength of culture, it means that if all the employees of an organization adhere to the same values and norms, and there is an agreement among them that okay, let us follow it, then the culture of strength is going to be high, otherwise it is going to be low, right. Now, it is very important to see that what kind of culture would be required for the performance management system, right. Similarly, we also need to see that especially those companies which are having operations in different countries. So, they are having different kind of national culture and organizational culture. So, we also need to look at these say points, that how performance management system is good, or it could be implemented, you can say, across multiple cultures, because organizations are operating in different cultures, right. Now, when we are talking about culture per se, now we are going to discuss some of the issues related to what you call culture. So, when we are going to define say culture of the organization, and we say that it represents norms and values of the organization, right. So, another thing that we are talking about is strong versus weak cultures. Okay. Right. So, now if you look at culture, we can have different kind of culture, right. One important kind of culture that we find in many organizations is known as bureaucratic culture. Then we also have entrepreneurial culture. Third one is what we call is a market culture, market oriented culture. And finally, we have a client culture, right. Now, this culture is also related with what you call the structure of the organization, right. So, which could be organic in nature, or it could be mechanistic in nature, right. So, when we are talking about entrepreneurial culture or say market oriented culture, this could be related with what you call the organic culture, and when we are talking about bureaucratic culture, it could be related with mechanistic culture, right. A client culture is a culture where people live like a family, right. Our people in an organization behave like a family member, it means that there is a very strong association among the members of the people. So, when we are going to discuss about culture and we are trying to relate it with performance, we have to see that which culture, what kind of culture would be more important. So, one typology that we talked about is strong versus weak culture, and the definition that we looked into is the different kind of culture starting with bureaucratic culture, okay, which is related with what we call mechanistic structure. Then you have entrepreneurial culture and market oriented culture, which could be related with an organic structure that is more flexible and people try to do everything to see that the organization does well in terms of profit, revenue generation and these kind of things. Now, if you look at the client culture, this is very important in the sense that where there is a very strong association among the members and they all follow the similar norms and values. It means the agreement among them is very high. So, when we are talking about culture per se and we are trying to relate it with performance, because then we have to see what kind of culture is going to be good. So, if you are, when you say bureaucratic culture, okay, then it leads to low performance. Entrepreneurial culture, high performance. A market oriented culture leads to a moderate performance, and this also lead to a moderate performance, right. So, that is how culture could be related with performance of the organization. What else we are going to look at is not only performance, but when we are talking about a performance management system. So, the kind of performance management system that you are going to have associated with different kind of culture, then you have to say that what kind of culture exists in the organization and whether there is a need to change the culture of the organization to make it more performance driven, right. So, you have to see that you are going to develop a strong culture where you see that the performance management system is driven by those norms and values which facilitate an effective performance, and people have an agreement among themselves, especially related to the norms and values of the organization, right. So, moving further, what we are going to discuss is the role of culture is that when you are going to look at the culture performance relationship, you have to see that whether there is a high agreement or low agreement, and that decides the strength of the culture, right. You remember we talked about 4 different kind of culture, and accordingly we try to relate it with performance. So, when we are going to design a performance management system, then you have to see that what kind of culture would be more appropriate in the organization. Moving further, what we are going to discuss is in this context is that how we achieve a better fit between culture and the performance of the organization, right. Now, if you look at this on one axis you find performance, on the other axis you find the culture. Right. Now, if you look at this, if the culture is strong or weak, or whether the performance you are looking forward to is low or high, right. So, you have to see that when you are going to examine the relationship between an appropriate fit between the culture and the organization. So, what are the things that you are looking forward to, right. You need to see that your culture is aligned with the goals and objectives of the organization. It means that you are going to have such a culture which facilitate effective performance, right, at the first stage when you are talking about alignment. Second thing is that when you are talking about the right fit, it means you are having such people who follow the cultural norms and values of the organization. So, they become an insider, right. If there is if people do not follow, it means that there is a misfit between the people and the kind of agreement that they are going to have with the norms and values of the organization, right. Now, apart from what you call alignment and this right fit, you also need to see that what kind of culture would be required for employees to perform well, right. So, if there is a better alignment, okay, and people are going to follow the norms and values of the organization, that is what we call culture, then people are going to perform well, because it is going to facilitate effective performance. Okay. Similarly, you also need to see that how it is related with the potential of the employees, because the role of the culture is supposed to see that these potentials come out, and for that you need to have a culture of such that like risk taking, where you are going to be more and more innovative, where you allow employees to grow and develop. Okay. So, if these things are available, then you say that yes, you are also going to capitalize on the potential of the employees for effective performance, right. And that is how we try to achieve a better fit between the culture and the performance. Now, after looking or examining this fit between the culture and the performance, we have to see what that how different dimensions of culture are going to be related with the performance management. Okay. It means, what we are going to discuss now is different dimensions of the culture, right, and then what are its implications for the performance management system. Now, what is the role of the culture in the organization? The role of the culture in the organization is to see that it drives performance, right. So, the first dimension is performance orientation. Okay. It means that people are innovative, they are motivated enough to perform well in the organization, right. Now, if you look at performance orientation, what does it mean? It means that people believe that yes, this is what I am going to do, this is the level of performance that I need to achieve, right, and I am trying to be as much innovative as possible in order to achieve the performance standards, right. So, here we are talking about performance orientation. So, if you have this kind of culture in an organization, what does it mean? What kind of implications it has for performance management, right? It means that it is going to emphasize and reward individual merit, because those who are going to perform well, they need to be rewarded based on their merit or performance. You remember we talked about pay for performance, where we said that merit based pay is going to motivate employees for higher performance, right. So, you have to see that those who have high performance orientation, okay, they are going to be more loyal and committed, because you are going to reward them, right. But it would also have certain implications for those who do not have high performance orientation, say low performance orientation, right. So, the implications will be that yes, if you are not able to perform, you need to maintain the same performance level at least, right. And since you are going to differentiate between high performance orientation and low performance orientation based on achievement and reward. So, you will find that those who are having high performance orientation, they would be rewarded well, and then they would be motivated by this. So, the implication here is that you need to create a culture where people are driven for high performance. So, you need to enable systems, structure, culture and processes, and make sure that they are aligned well for high performance, right. Now, another orientation that is very important to the culture is future thinking, that is future orientation, right. So, maybe in the present you are doing very well, but you also need to emphasize on the future. You are not only concerned about the past or the present, but you are also concerned about the future. So, this dimension of culture has another kind of implications. It means that you are not only concerned about short term goals, but your expectations or your goals are in terms of long term, right. So, it means that you are looking forward to long term performance, right. And if you are looking for long term performance, it is possible only when you are intrinsically motivated, not extrinsically motivated, right. So, if you have a low future orientation, it means that you are you have a short term orientation, because your concern is present and you believe in getting rewarded immediately, and this could be related to extrinsic reward. But if you are driven by intrinsic motivation, it means that yes, you are not only concerned about the present, but you are also concerned about the future and what kind of achievements or goals you have for the future and how you are going to achieve it. Another important factor is that this gender egalitarianism. What does it mean? Okay. Now, sometimes you know that there could be cultural differences in the belief that men and women are different. Okay. So, they should be assigned different kind of roles in the organization, right. So, if this is the belief, what kind of implications it will have for performance management, right. It means you are talking about something which is not good, which is not favorable, because you are trying to differentiate based on the gender. Okay. So, you should not develop a culture where you are going to differentiate between people based on their gender, especially the biological sex, right. And if that happens, then what happens? You are going to differentiate, right. You provide less opportunities for professional development to the women, right. And you also find that if there are resistant and resentment to feedback from superior female superiors, because if you have a boss who is a woman, then if she is giving you feedback, then you also resist, right. So, the managers, especially the male managers, need to be aware about it and see that how they can condense this kind of things. It means they need to minimize these kind of attitude and behavior, so that these kind of problems does not come up. So, if this is a problem related to the culture where there are social beliefs to differentiate between men and women, then it is not good for the organization. Then another important factor is assertiveness. What does it mean when you say that assertiveness? Assertiveness means that standing to the point while being polite, right. This is also a kind of value where you are trying to be tough and assertive. It means that you are showing a dominant behavior, okay, compared to being modest or tender, but at the same time you try to assert to it to ensure that whatever you are saying is good and correct, right, but with all the humility, is not it. Assertiveness does not mean that you are going to be tough in the sense that you are going to show it in your behavior while being assertive and not following certain norms and values, right. So, you have to say that when you are talking about assertiveness, what are its implications for the performance management. Okay. So, are you going to reward those employees which are aggressive, competitive and dominant? No. So, if that happens, then it is not good. Okay. So, those who are going to be low on assertiveness, what happens? It means if they are not dominant and competitive and aggressive, then you are not going to reward them well. So, the relationship that you are going to build up, make sure that it is not based on confrontation, but cooperation. Okay. Now, when you are looking assertiveness as a dimension of the culture, it means when you say certain thing, stick to it, but with all the humility, right. So, it does not mean that you are going to be dominant and competitive. It does not mean being aggressive, right, that is more important. Then another important factor of culture is individualism and collectivism. This kind of differences you can find in many countries, and there has been surveys which identify and try to relate it with the culture of that particular nation, right, and that is what we know as individualism and collectivism. Now, if you look at individualism versus collectivism, what does it mean, right? Collectivism means that you try to live in the group, you try to collaborate with each other, okay. You are less competitive, right. Similarly, if you are talking about individualism, it means that you are orienting yourself only, you do not collaborate, but you are competing with each others, right. So, it depends upon, basically it is related to the relationship with other people, right, whether you are going to be competitive or not, right. So, basically if you are going to be in groups, working with the group or the team, you are going for being collective, or if you are working individually and try to be competitive, it means that you are individualistic. See, that you can find in differences in national culture also. For example, if you look at Indian context, you will find that people are more collectivist than individualistic, but gradually we are moving from being collectivist to individualistic in our approach. The problem is with individualistic approach that you look only for yourself, you look for your interest, your motivation, your achievement, right, and you try to get reward and feedback, right. But when you are looking at the collectivism, it means that you are talking about the team based relationship, team based achievement, team based orientation, team based relationship, right. Another important factor that has been identified is power distance, right. Do you maintain this kind of distance in the hierarchy in the organization, right. Again it is related to the national culture. In Indian context, we try to maintain high power distance, right. So, if you have a high power distance culture, then what happens? The feedback is one way. It means that feedback comes from the supervisor and he maintains this kind of relationship with he maintains distance with the subordinates. Then there would be less participation, right. But if you look at low power distance countries, then what happens? There is a better cooperation, greater participation in the performance management system. There is a feedback is two way also, right. People feel more comfortable, okay, while disagreeing with supervisors and setting the goals. So, you need to see that what is desirable is low power distance. If you are maintaining higher power distance in the hierarchy, then it is not good for the feedback, right. Another important factor is that you remember we talked about performance orientation, right, where you are only concerned about the task and achievement and task performance. In some culture, you will find that the orientation is tilted towards what you call the people and the relationship, right. So, you try to maintain relationship at all costs, even at the cost of performance. Okay. So, human orientation means that yes, you try to be more social in your relationship and try to see that you develop friends, networks, relationship, support, right, with the people, right. Now, this is what is good, but sometimes what happens, but if you are going to be high on this particular dimension, then what will happen? It may not be good for the performance, because if you are going to be high on human orientation, then probably you focus or emphasize more on relationship aspect than the task aspect, right. But if you are low on human orientation, probably you are more focused on task than relationship, right. Another important factor of culture which is related with performance management or has its implications for this is uncertainty avoidance, right. What does it mean when we say uncertainty avoidance? This is a kind of behavior. So, basically the thing is that whether you live in the past or whether you live in the future, right. Similarly, what you are looking forward to, that is whether you want a structured system, culture and process in place, or you do not want a structured system. Because if you have a structured system, process and culture, then you think that is everything is well described, okay, documented well, and then you have to follow it. But if there is no orderliness, no structure, there is no formal procedures, then it would lead to high level of uncertainty, right. And it has implications for performance management, because you know that performance management requires extensive documentation, right. So, you go for documentation, you go for formal processes and systems, right, that is related to high uncertainty avoidance. But if you are giving informal feedback, then it is related to what you call low uncertainty avoidance, right. Now, what we are going to discuss next is a model related to performance culture. So, what kind of performance culture happens, right. Now, if you look at this maturity model, we move from level 1 to level 2 and then 3 to 4. Now, see what happens at the first level, when we are trying to see that we are going to have a culture which is driven by the performance, right. So, at the first level what happens to start with? There is a chaos, there is uncertainty, okay. You do not know what is going to happen, what will happen, right. So, what you need to do is at the first level, okay, you need to see that what needs to be done, because at that particular level your goals and achievements are not aligned with each other, right. There is no mission, goals and objectives, right. You do not have any kind of accountability, transparency in the system, right. There is no use of insights, there are lot of conflict between the people, right. There is a lack of trust, and whatever data that is generated with the performance is not acceptable, right. Similarly, whatever information is there, it is not consistent with each other. Okay. So, at the first level you have what you have when you are talking about performance culture, that it is creating a kind of chaos, okay, that need to be managed well. So, when you move from this stage to the next level, that is at the department level, then try to optimize things. You try to bring in certain systems and processes which could be supposed to be good, right. So, you try to see that there is some kind of alignment between the functional goals and the mission of the organization, right. You try to bring some transparency and accountability, right. Similarly, you want to see that okay, what kind of action plan is required, though it may not be very good, right. Then some kind of cooperation comes out, it means maybe that depending upon the opportunities you try to see whether you should cooperate or not cooperate, right. Then you have conflicting views of databases, okay. There could be lot of disagreement, right. And then availability and currency directed by department sources. So, basically you are going to see that how you can achieve the goals and objectives of the department, because you are still not aligned your goals and objectives with the organization. So, this at this level you go for departmental optimization, and the third level you try to see that you are going to develop a culture which is driving performance, right. So, this is what we know as performance directed culture emerging. And when you are trying to move to this level where you want to develop a very strong culture. So, if you look at this particular aspect at this stage, you try to see that yes, you have your goals and objectives are aligned with each other, at least some transparency and accountability is there, okay. And you try to see that okay, what needs to be done across functions, right. You try to resolve your conflicts, the data is acceptable you can say, and then you try to see that how you can make use of the information. And finally, when you mature at this level, it means that your culture is aligned with other things and it is really leading to higher performance, that is where you are trying to realize the goals and objectives of this. It means at this level your goals and objectives are finally aligned with the goals and objectives of the organization at different levels, okay. And then you have higher level of transparency and accountability, and then you have closed loop. It means that you have systems and processes where you get information, okay, and action is taken based on that, okay. And then you have developed a good mechanism to resolve the conflict, and the data and the source of data is acceptable, right. And finally, you see that you are going to measure it and see that how it translates into business and performance. So, if you look at this performance culture maturity model, so you move from a chaos and gradually you try to say that you are able to move to a level where you are going to develop a culture which is very strong and which leads to higher performance, right. So, it is something like this. So, it is something like this. So, you are here, that is the first level, okay, which leads to chaos. Then you go for optimization at some level, then at the next level again you move, right. You try to drive culture, and then that is where you basically realize it, okay. It means here what you call that is culture is very weak, and here it is the strength of the culture is very high. So, you move from a weak to a strong culture, and this is possible when you say that you are moving from a bureaucratic culture to what you call a more entrepreneurial culture or a market oriented culture, where you are really concerned with the performance, okay. And at this level what happens during this period is what we know as cultural transformation, which is very much required by organizations to perform well, okay. So, gradually this cultural transformation happens where you move from a weak to a strong culture and from a bureaucratic to a more entrepreneurial or a market oriented culture, right. Now, after discussing about this performance culture maturity model, we move to the next level, that how we are going to build a strong performance culture, right. So, these are the factors which is very important, right. So, first stage you look at it, there is a leadership commitment. As a part of the strategy, make sure that leaders are committed to it, okay. And then the strategy is cascaded down from business level to unit level and then team to individuals level, and then there is a high level of congruence and consistent across these strategies, starting with individual to group to units to the business, right. And then you also develop your performance management strategy, that how you are going to develop, execute and implement a system which is going to really see that the performance of the people is managed at different levels, or the performance of the organization also is managed. Then at the next level you are going to see that even if people are performing at a highest level or a better level you can say, then how they continue to be motivated to perform at a consistently high level, and that is where you are going to adopt a reward and recognition strategy. Then you have to see that how they could be intrinsically and extrinsically motivated, what kind of reward system is to be used, whether it could be financial or non-financial reward system, and then finally, you are going to develop a culture which is going to be more performance oriented, right. And if you are going to develop a performance oriented culture, you are going to see that how it leads to an effective performance. So, it is very, very important to develop a very strong performance culture, because that leads to high performance, right. Now, these are some of the recommendations for the practice which could be adopted to see that how culture can lead to better performance. So, the first point that I have already advocated talked about is having a strong organizational performance culture. It means, when you are going to have a performance management system, make sure that it is tied with the vision, objectives and goals of the organization, and there is engagement and involvement of the top management. Make sure that top management is also involved in the development and implementation, and provide all the resources which is required to develop an effective performance management system, right. Then the next is having a theory of performance. It means that yes, everybody understands that what kind of behavior, processes, outcomes are important, starting with the individual to the group and the organization, right. It means everybody is driven by the performance. So, you need to inculcate a culture where everybody in all their actions, processes and outcomes, and see that how it could be linked with the performance of the organization, right. Third one is do your homework. What does it mean? See what are the cultural differences, whether people are sensitive to it or not. Okay. Because of the cultural differences, you remember we talked about a number of dimensions. Okay. So, and there could be differences in the culture, like when we are talking about uncertainty avoidance or gender differences, or say individualism and collectivism. So, how these factors are going to influence performance management system of the organization, because you need to look into the implications of these kind of things. So, be aware about the cultural differences, see what kind of things you have, and from there where do you want to move. For example, if you have a bureaucratic culture, it may not lead to an effective performance management, right. So, you need to move away from a bureaucratic culture to a more entrepreneurial culture, a market oriented culture, right, and ultimately try to be a client culture, where everybody agrees to the norms and values of this organization. But in order to go for this, you need to understand what kind of culture you have, right. So, that you can see that from this kind of culture, you need to go for a transformation of that culture to see that what kind of culture would be required, right. Then translate meanings, not just words. Means you need to see that when you are going for transformation to a good culture, a strong culture, make sure that the behaviors and beliefs are changing. Okay. It is simply not making certain statements that we are changing, but make sure that in letter and spirit everything is happening, right. So, that people understand what needs to be done and how they can go for a change. Another important thing is that hiring local HR person, because the local HR person understands the kind of culture that is prevalent among the people, right. The national culture, the regional culture, because that is also influencing the culture of the organization. Then, though you are going to use the same kind of performance management system across organizations, across units, but allow some flexibility depending upon the culture, so that you are able to make some kind of accommodation and adjustments to the cultural practices prevalent in that particular region or culture, right. Then you see that how culture is going to influence performance management activities. You remember we talked about the implications of different type of orientations and relate to the culture and their influence on the performance. So, if you are driven by task factor or relationship factor, that matters. Okay. If you are driven by high performance or distance or low power distance or low power distance, that matters. So, what you need to look at it, that see that how culture is going to influence performance management system in terms of its implications for the performance management. But if things go wrong, do not blame it on the culture, because culture is not responsible for bad performance. Okay. What you need to do is you need to identify that how the culture can be better aligned, so that it facilitates effective performance. So, culture alone cannot be responsible. You have to see that in addition to culture, you are also trying to bring other factors like systems, structure and processes, and they are all aligned with each other, okay, so that you are able to achieve the goals and objectives of the organization. Okay. So, that is all. Thank you very much.